Hey everybody, thank you very much. Orlando Ruiz Jr. Welcome to another classic horror movie review. Number 8 on my classic horror review series for October 2023. And this is my review of a film from director James Whale, who brought movies like The Old Dark House, the original 30s The Man in the Iron Mask, the original Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, and of course, The Bride of Frankenstein, which I'm talking about right now. This movie came out in 1935. It is a black and white monster movie classic, once again starring the great Boris Karloff and Colin, who reprised their roles from the first film. And this movie is one of those movies that I rewatch every spooky October season, my favorite time of the year, much like the original Frankenstein and many of the Universal monster classics. The idea of Frankenstein's monster having some sort of a mate or bride made for him by Dr. Frankenstein was something that was brought up in the 1818 novel from Mary Shelley, but it never came to fruition even in the story. And just that idea, that little nugget in that book, was basically the basis for this sequel, which expanded on it and created a whole story around it. When this movie begins, right after the opening credits, we get a recap of the events of the 1931 original in the form of a conversation with a guy named Lord Byron, Percy B. Shelley, Mary Shelley's husband, and the author of the 1818 novel, Mary Shelley herself, played by actress Elsa Lanchester. And she also plays the bride of the monster in the film. And they're gushing about her book, and Lord Byron is going on, and as he's talking, we go into kind of a flashback of the events of the original film. Having the author of the Frankenstein novel, Mary Shelley, in the beginning of this movie as a character is a very outside of the box, very creative way of getting into this story, and when you get down to it, is downright brilliant. As she's talking to her husband and this Lord Byron guy, she begins to talk about what would happen after the events of the first film and proceeds to go into the rest of the story. The story picks up with all the angry villagers with their torches and pitchforks standing by the wreckage of the old windmill as they begin to leave after they feel like now the monster has now perished, and so now that they feel like they've done their duty, they start to leave the scene, but two people remain. No, sorry, three. The mother and father of the little girl that drowned in the first film by the hands of the Frankenstein monster, and the third person being Minnie the maid, played by Una O'Connor, who is also in The Invisible Man. So the mother and father of the little girl that drowned in the first movie are standing by the wreckage of the mill, and there is a hole within the wreckage, and the father slips into the hole, falls into some water, and little does he know the monster is still down there, and he's still alive. For some reason, Minnie the maid, Una O'Connor's character, is still hanging around the scene. She sees the monster and begins to flip out screaming, has that very high-pitched, squeaky, comedic-sounding scream as she runs away back to Castle Frankenstein. She warns everybody that the monster is still alive, but they all basically dismiss her and just tell her to shut up. And she's like, may they all be murdered in their beds. It's a very little nice comedic moment in the movie. And then pretty soon we see Henry Frankenstein is getting better. He's starting to come out of it. His fiancee Elizabeth is with him. She kind of nurses him back to health as he realizes he did some stupid things, and it's time for him to kind of hang up the whole mad scientist bit. That doesn't last very long because pretty soon there is a man that shows up at the door at Castle Frankenstein who wants to see Henry, an old teacher of his, played by Ernest Thesiger in the role of Dr. Pretorious, a very sinister, creepy old guy that wants to continue the same kind of research that Henry Frankenstein was doing when it comes to the reanimation of dead tissue and basically making live people out of dead people. As it turns out, Dr. Pretorius has been working on some experiments of his own, going about it a different way as opposed to Henry, who is reanimating dead tissue from old body parts using the lightning to bring his creation to life. Dr. Pretorius says that he's growing his creations and he has all these little people, tiny little people in these glass jars that look like finished human beings, only he can't get the size quite right. Considering this is a black and white movie from 1935, as far as the special effects, this moment in the film is actually pretty impressive, with Dr. Pretorius showing off his little creations in these glass jars to Henry Frankenstein. And he's still very traumatized. He's not ready to continue with his experiments. He turns down Dr. Pretorius' offer, but Dr. Pretorius has a few tricks up his sleeve. There's actually a brief moment there in the woods where the monster actually tries to save someone's life, the life of a young girl, but some hunters spot him and think that he's up to no good as usual, and so they begin to shoot at him, And as everybody treats this monster like a monster, the monster reacts like a monster and only lashes out even more. And eventually, all the townspeople, the horde of angry villagers, come back to get him all tied up and put him on a pole, take him to somewhere where they lock him up once again. But the monster, being the monster, he's gonna have that freakish, monster strength. Once again, he breaks out and begins to roam around once again, where he comes to this cottage of an old blind man. One of the best scenes in the film, where he gets treated like a normal human being because the blind man, of course, doesn't see what he looks like. Honestly, though, sometimes when I'm watching The Bride of Frankenstein, I'm kind of halfway expecting the monster to run out of the cottage screaming, with the old blind man standing in the doorway of his broken door saying, "Where are you going? I was gonna make espresso." And yeah, just a great moment from one of the greatest comedies of all time. If you haven't seen Young Frankenstein, you got to check it out. It's best if you watch the old Frankenstein movies. In The Bride of Frankenstein, though, that scene with the old man in the cottage doesn't end as comedic as it does in the Mel Brooks spoof film. It ends in a much more sad way, and eventually we see the Frankenstein monster end up in the hands of the evil Dr. Pretorious. In the third act of the film, Dr. Frankenstein reluctantly works with Dr. Pretorious to bring to life another creation from dead tissue, a woman, to be the bride of the Frankenstein monster, and she is played by Elsa Lanchester, who also played Mary Shelley at the very beginning of the film. And anyone that's familiar with Mary Poppins, she was also in that film as the mother of the little kids that Mary Poppins looks after. Very similar to the casting of Boris Karloff as the Frankenstein monster, there's just something about these actors and their eyes that lends itself to the hint of something dark that lurks underneath, and something that is highlighted by the makeup. The makeup job in this movie by Jack Pierce. Jack Pierce also did the makeup for the monster in the original 1931 Frankenstein film. He also did the makeup for 1941's The Wolfman. He did the makeup for House of Dracula, Son of Dracula, and also for 1935's Werewolf of London, and the makeup still looks great. I also want to mention that Dwight Frye appears in this movie. He was also in the original Frankenstein movie as the character of Fritz, and he also appears in this movie playing a different character, the character of Carl, who is an assistant to the mad scientist in this movie, very similar to the first Frankenstein movie. And very famously, he was the original Renfield in the original Bela Lugosi Dracula film. The four-star classic, it is one of the greatest movies of all time, one of the greatest sequels of all time, one of the greatest black and white movies ever made, one of the greatest monster movies ever made. It's a movie that I highly recommend you all check out. It's perfect for the October spooky season, and you should definitely check it out. It can be found on streaming, like on Peacock, where they have a bunch of the old Universal monster classics. But like I'm always saying, if you want to get yourself a hard copy before they're all gone, they're out there. This is my copy of the Frankenstein collection, 8 films of the franchise, the original Frankenstein franchise. And it's basically Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, The Ghost of Frankenstein, House of Frankenstein, and then House of Dracula is in there as well. And then it caps off with Abbott and Costello, Meet Frankenstein. Thank you all very much for watching this classic movie review. I very much appreciate it. If you're a new viewer, if you're into this kind of thing, hit the bell, subscribe. Please don't forget to share, comment, and like. It really helps out the channel. If you're a returning viewer, thank you very much for watching. And please be on the lookout for more classic movie reviews in this spooky season of October, leading up to the big night of Halloween. I'll be turning out these reviews until the end of the month. Thank you very much. Everybody take care. God bless. Till next time.